Hello, Reporter Room investigators. Oh my gosh, we have a huge show for you today. We have a lot of new information. The prosecution has filed a new motion regarding defense plans. So we have a little bit of an idea of how Ann Taylor is planning to proceed on this. We have Bryan Kohberger had the photos of one of the victims on his phone. We have some information proving that BK did have other connections to the victims. We have proof that BK was on the University of Idaho campus. Now, remember, he went to Washington State University. So why was he there? We're also going to talk about one of the warrants that law enforcement served. That's a Spotify warrant. Um, and we're also going to talk about the Glock. Why did he have a Glock with him when he was arrested in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania? So let's get into this. Come on in, come on in. Tell me where you're from.
This is Reporter Room with Jessica Davies.
And if you haven't subscribed, it's free, and I can't get to 40,000 subscribers without your help, and we are getting there. And we're doing a giveaway when we get there, so please subscribe. Okay, let's get started. So we have a lot of great information. Come on in, tell me where you're from, and we have so much stuff to unpack. My name is Jessica Davies. I'm an investigative journalist, and my job is to investigate crimes, crime scenes, and potential suspects, and share with you how to do the same thing. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and know that everything I'm sharing with you is my opinion. So thank you to our subscribers, our mods, and our channel members. Our channel members are the ones with the blue, green, and red verified check marks. Our mods are the ones with the wrenches, and I think we have a couple of head mods in here. I know I saw Mike. Mike is here. Thank you so much for modding today. Wicked is modding. Top Cat is modding. Thank you so much for modding. Really appreciate you guys showing up and being here. Kimmy is here. Thank you so much for modding. Pepper's modding. Thank you, Pepper. And here's our other head mod, Enjas. Hi, Enjas. Thank you so much for modding. Okay, I'm going to check in with chat in just a moment, but we have so much stuff to get into. So we're going to talk about the proof that Bryan Kohberger was hanging out the University of Idaho campus. Was he watching the victims? The very interesting Spotify warrant. Does this link to Instagram? And we're going to be talking about connections to the victims, including photos on Bryan Kohberger's phone, and new information regarding the motions filed by the prosecution. Let's start with that. There's a lot of breaking news here, so we'll start with the prosecution. Let me grab this. And we'll get going on this. Let me take this down. Okay, so this is brand new. Let me move myself out of the way. Okay, so this is, the prosecutor says that Kohberger's defense will argue evidence that the evidence was planted in the Idaho student case. So we are now learning from a motion filed by Latah County Prosecutor Bill Thompson how Ann Taylor is going to be arguing this case. I think this is really interesting. It makes me wonder if she's reading your chats, because we know this is one of the big conspiracy theories that's been going around, is that the knife sheath was planted. So the prosecutors are saying that Bryan Kohberger's defense team will argue at his trial that someone else could have planted a knife sheath with Bryan Kohberger's DNA at the home where the 1122 King Road house on November 13th of 2022. Latah County Prosecutor Bill Thompson made the claim in a motion filed in the case this week, and he says, quote, "Instead of challenging the conclusion that the DNA on the knife sheath belonged to the defendant," so they're not challenging the DNA, they're not going to say that it didn't belong to Bryan, "the defense expert disclosures reveal that the defense plans to argue the DNA on the knife sheath does not prove the defendant was ever at the crime scene, and that the knife sheath itself could have been planted by the real perpetrator. Now, this is according to prosecutor Bill Thompson in a motion that he filed. So we don't know what the defense's plans are. I can't verify this because many of the court documents that detail both sides' plan for expert witnesses have been sealed. So it's not currently possible to compare Prosecutor Bill Thompson's characterization of the defense plans and compare that with what the defense is saying in their own court filings, because the motions are, a lot of them are still sealed, and until the judge unseals them, we will not have them. Now, Bryan Kohberger is innocent until proven guilty, but I'm curious, what do you guys think? Do you think that the knife sheath was planted by someone? And if so, why would they plant it to frame Bryan Kohberger? Let me know what you think in the comment section, and I'm going to check in with chat in just a second. So let's get into the next piece of news because we have a lot of information to get through. The next one is Bryan Kohberger had connections to the victims. Let's do that one next. Let me grab that. Okay, I just want to make sure everybody can see that. And yeah, tell me what you guys think. Do you think that somebody planted the knife sheath? All Ann Taylor needs is one juror, right? She just needs one juror. Hey, Panjam. So yeah, just one juror is all she needs. So come on in, tell me where you're from, and let me know if you think that this was planted. Is that possible? Kimmy thinks she's definitely attempting to pander to the conspiracy theories. I told you guys a little while ago, I thought maybe she was reading our chats. I would think that that would be something that would be definitely, if I were a defense attorney, I would definitely want to know what people were thinking, try to figure out, what might work and what might not work. So I think it's really interesting. Stephanie does not think it was planted. Brother Mike does not think it was planted. Christine does not think it was planted. Heather says, makes zero sense to me that anyone would plant a knife sheath, just my opinion. I just don't know why. Nobody had ever heard of him. So I don't know why they would plant a knife sheath with his DNA on it. But, we'll see what she has to say. We haven't heard her side of it. This is Bill Thompson characterizing what she's going to do. So she may come back and say, we may find when we read her side of it that isn't exactly what it says. Nadia doesn't think it was planted. Hey, Donna. Hi, Pepper. Veronica does not think it was planted. Top Cat does no, and no jury will believe that in a million years. All right, so I'm going to check in with you guys, but let's listen to this. I've heard a lot of people say there were no connections to the victims. I just do want to say that there are connections to the victims. I showed the receipts on my channel, but I also just want to, because I know not everybody watched all my videos from last year. I think I've made like 135, 138, something like that, videos on this case. So anyway, I have a big playlist. If you want to go through it, it's definitely worth watching. But let's listen. And this is Dan Abrams doing an interview on the fact that Bryan Kohberger did message Idaho victims on social media. He says DMS. I think he means DMs.
Provide a connection to victims Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan. People magazine reports that in the weeks before the November murders, Kohberger ate at the restaurant where two of the victims, Madison and Xana, worked. Quote, according to a former employee at the Mad Greek restaurant in Moscow, Idaho, Bryan Kohberger came in at least twice to grab vegan pizza. Two of the victims, Madison and Xana Kernodle, were servers at the restaurant. It's unclear if either woman ever waited on Kohberger or if they even interacted.
Now, the Mad Greek has denied that Bryan Kohberger was ever in their restaurant. However, how would you know as an owner every single person that was in your restaurant? I'm just curious what you guys think. I don't think there would be any way for them to know for sure who was in there.
People also reports that an Instagram account belonging to Kohberger followed both Madison and Xana and the third female victim, Kaylee Goncalves. And according to a source in late October, an account that authorities believe belonged to Bryan Kohberger sent a greeting to one of the female victims. When he didn't get a reply, he sent several more messages to her. He slid into one of the girl's DMS several times.
I think he means DMs.
But she didn't respond. The source tells People basically it was just him saying, "Hey, how are you?" But he did it again and again. The report in People states Kohberger was incredibly persistent in sending those messages, even though the victim never responded.
So we have heard this also. Dateline NBC reported this. Christy and Steve Goncalves have also reported seeing their daughters and Maddie's Instagram account that did have Bryan Kohberger following. And then they said that he was liking all of Maddie's. Now, I have some interesting news that Bryan Kohberger did have photos of one of the victims on his cell phone, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But let's continue on with this for a second.
Investigators already have suggested that Kohberger was stalking his victims months before the murders. Cell phone records laid out in the probable cause affidavit.
And we now know that in Idaho, stalking is not the correct word. Bill Thompson has made that very clear. Stalking means that the victims would have to feel harassed or threatened. So you would, if you were stalking someone, you might call and make sure they can see it's you on the caller ID and hang up, or follow them and they can see you. But in my opinion, I don't think that Maddie, Kaylee, Ethan, or Xana knew who Bryan Kohberger was. So I think surveilled is the correct terminology to use in Idaho, based on their law, which means that stalking has to qualify stalking, the victims had to be aware, they had to feel harassed, they had to be aware that the person existed. And I don't think that was the case. So I think surveilling.
David show he was near the house where the murders took place up to a dozen times in the months leading up to the killings. Even the victims' families were still trying to figure out if their paths had crossed. Shannon Gray is the attorney for the Goncalves family.
I don't know of anybody that did know him. All those girls were social. They were involved in the college. They were working hard, waitressing and doing different things. So the idea that he may have ran across their paths, I don't think is uncommon.
And I'm going to show you proof that he was on the campus at the University of Idaho, even though he didn't attend there. He was a teaching assistant and attended the Washington State University. So why was he hanging around at the University of Idaho? We're going to do that next. And then we're going to get into victims, that fact that he had pictures of the victims on his phone.
Also this week, the search warrant for Kohberger's Pullman, Washington apartment, just miles from where the students were killed, was unsealed, showing that investigators collected a pillow with reddish-brown spot-stained mattress covers, several possible hair strands, a black glove.
And we still haven't heard anything about this reddish-brown spot or the hair strands. They could have just been his hair strands, right? It didn't necessarily have to, but if any of those hair strands, including an animal hair strand, links back to Murphy the dog or Buddy the dog or to any of the victims, I think that's going to be a problem for Ann Taylor. But so far, we have not seen in any of the motions that have been unsealed hide or hair of these hair strands.
There's also a new gag order that's even stricter. Now, you saw that piece of interview there with one of the family's attorneys. Even they won't be able to speak now publicly anymore.
So the gag order was put in place by Ann Taylor on behalf of Bryan Kohberger, and she was trying to protect Bryan Kohberger's right to a fair trial. And I think we all want to make sure that he does get a fair trial. Nobody wants us to be unfair. And Bryan Kohberger is innocent until proven guilty. So let's talk about the next. Oh gosh, this isn't letting me pull this up. I don't even know how to pull this up. Let me pull it up this way. We'll do it the old-fashioned way. Okay. I'm just having to pull this up the old-fashioned way because I subscribe to Newsweek, but that's still not enough for me to put it up on the page, so it's okay. Sorry, let's just pull this up though. I may have to come back to this one. Yeah, this is frustrating. There's just so much breaking news that's just piled on top. I have to dig to find some of these, and it's just not letting me dig. It's making me look at everything from the last few days, and there's been so much breaking news. I'm just having to, it takes me like hours to put together these live streams. So let me just share it with you. I wanted to show you receipts. I do have the article. The problem is that New York Post won't let me show it. So basically, we have at University of Idaho, according, let me try this one more way. Let me try this one more way. Got it. Okay, yay. Okay, that's great. Persistence. Okay, so I had this pulled up on the New York Post, but that's fine. We'll pull it up on People. So Bryan Kohberger did visit the Idaho Student Union before. So remember, he did not go to the University of Idaho. He went to Washington State University. So why was he hanging out on the campus? So listen to this, you guys. In December, after BK was arrested, 3 different students came out and told People, and the New York Post also had this, that they believed that they saw BK at the Student Union building on the Idaho campus in the weeks before the crimes. I'm watching my words here. The November 13th crimes, and that they later recognized him after he was arrested. This is Chelsea telling us first. It was really early in the semester, recalls Chelsea, a sophomore at the University of Idaho. She was a sophomore. He was at the food court of the student union. So he's inside the University of Idaho student union inside the food court drinking water. So he's not like he's there because he loves the food so much. He's drinking water. He sat by himself, as according to Chelsea. She says, quote, he was the type to stare, and we are going to do who BK had a picture of on his phone in just a second. He was the type to stare, she continues. He wouldn't look away if you caught him staring, like he wanted you to notice that he was just looking at you. He didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't say anything, just stared. She said, quote, I told my friend not to be suspicious, but to look at him because the eye contact was making me uncomfortable, she continues. It was weird that we ended up leaving and eating outside because we wanted to get away from him. She is not the only student that saw him. So we have another source. Another student told People, and this was also reported out by the New York Post, that she saw BK frequently enough around campus that she assumed that he was a student at the University of Idaho. Again, he was attending Washington State University, so why was he there? She said, it's not a huge school. It's like a small town. So you start seeing the same faces again and again. They become familiar, like, that you've seen them in class or around campus. I definitely saw him more than once. He was just really quiet and really intense, staring. He made me uncomfortable. So that's student number 2. He made me uncomfortable staring. So it just doesn't make any sense as to why, he would have been hanging out at the University of Idaho. What business would he have had to have gone there? I just think it's odd. He didn't go to school there, and he's sitting there drinking water, so it wasn't like he was there for the food, right? So let's go ahead and get into the Bryan Kohberger had pictures of victim on his cell phone. And again, I think one of these by itself, you could explain away, but and this is where Ann Taylor, saying that he doesn't have connections to the victims. There's multiple accounts of him being at the University of Idaho. I don't think he was stalking, because stalking in Idaho, their definition is very narrow. The victims, you have to feel threatened or manipulated to be stalked in Idaho. So, but I do think he was surveilling them. So listen to this guest that was on Ashley Banfield on News.
Kohberger in jail awaiting the next hearing in June, a gag order, making it very difficult to sort of put the pieces together in this very strange mystery. But we are learning something tonight about Bryan Kohberger and his predilections. On his phone, according to People magazine and News Nation's reporting as well, on Bryan Kohberger's phone, numerous pictures of one of the victims.
Okay, so not one picture, but numerous. You guys know I have to do commentary on this for it to fall under fair use.
I had a chance to talk with Steve Helling, who's investigative reporter with People magazine, about some of the findings regarding that piece of information, the fact that Kohberger's phone had loads of pictures of one of the victims. This is our conversation earlier.
So, somebody who's very familiar with the investigation says that after they arrested Bryan Kohberger, they took his phone, which of course is what you'd expect. And now that they've been looking at his phone, they have all of his communications. They have all of the things that you would have on your phone. And one of the things that they looked at were the pictures. And there are pictures of at least one of the victims in his photo roll. We don't know the details of those pictures. We don't know whether they are pictures he took from a distance. We don't know if they're pictures he downloaded from her social media, but he had pictures of one of the female victims on his phone.
And for all we know, it could have been pictures, that he took himself. And so I do think that this is significant for people who have said, what would be his motive? And, a lot of people feel like he is innocent until proven guilty. I do have to talk about this case in terms of Bryan Kohberger, though, because he's the one that's, the prosecution and the defense team were talking about in terms of their motions. We're going to continue to delve into this. And then we're going to talk about Spotify and why law enforcement wanted this particular warrant.
Is anyone pointing to which one of the three female victims might be the one who's on his phone?
I mean, we all have our suspicions, and of course the cops certainly know, but that's not something that they're telling. There's a gag order in place. They can't tell us all these details. But yes, it was one of the three female victims, and cops sure know who they are. You and I could guess all day, and we'd probably guess correctly, but we don't have that officially.
So who do you think it was? In my opinion, I believe it was Maddie, just based on what Steve and Christy Goncalves have said about him liking all of Maddie's photos. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. But I do think this is interesting. So there was a gag order put in place. I've seen a lot of people thinking that the gag order was put in place by the prosecution, that somehow they're hiding things. That is not what happened. For Bryan Kohberger to make sure that he had a fair trial, Ann Taylor asked for the gag order on behalf of Bryan Kohberger, and so Judge John Judge of Latah County granted it. Now, Judge Stephen H., I'm just not going to say his full name because the algorithm misunderstands what I'm saying sometimes, but the judge in Ada County, now he has loosened a lot of things. He said, we don't need all of this sealed. So he's, said you can redact what you want to redact, but we don't need all of this sealed. So he's loosening up, and that's why we're getting all of this new information. But this is why the gag order was put in place, because so much stuff was leaking out into the media.
And of course, without even being able to name them, it's hard to push further to suggest, is that person potentially the target of all of this? Like, was there one person who was the target and maybe the other three ended up as collateral? Are they saying anything about that?
Well, before the second gag order came along, we were getting, you were getting it, I was getting it, we were getting these tips. And, I think that they had a pretty good idea even back then, a month ago, of who the primary target was. Whether or not these pictures are of that person, who you and I both pretty much know, is remains to be seen.
So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that it's going to be Maddie.
So what else did they get, or are you able to find out about from, combing his photo rolls? Was there any other clue in there?
No, but it certainly seems as though he was, he was very aware of what was going on in this house. We know that. Obviously, besides the photos, we already know that his phone just kept pinging from that area. So, he'd been there several times. So I think the phone is going to be.
So he was there 11 times leading up to the crimes, and again there that morning after the crimes were committed.
A real treasure trove of information for the investigators, not just from the pictures, not just from, we don't know the texts he sent. We do know, as we talked about a few weeks ago, that he had reached out to one of the girls on Instagram. So, there's going to be a lot of tracks there that they can look at, and, tracks that I don't think that he covered.
There's one line in your exclusive where your source says it looked as though Kohberger was certainly, quote, paying attention to her. Were you able to read into that any further?
I think paying attention means something more than just, noticing somebody. Paying attention means that you are, purposefully and very deliberately, keeping track of somebody, keeping track of who they are, what they're doing, that type of thing. So
again, surveilling is going to be the word I'm going to be using, since we can't use stalking because of the statute in Idaho, which says that stalking means the victims have to feel harassed or threatened. And in this case, I don't think the victims really knew who he was. Maybe they met him one time or twice at the Mad Greek, but I don't think they would have even known when he came in the room who he was. Allegedly, he's innocent until proven guilty. But this is a journalist, and he's got some sources inside. So I definitely think this is worth going through together.
There was somebody who was on his radar for a while. And that person, that girl, was unfortunately one of the victims.
All this time we've been trying to figure out the nexus between this alleged killer and these victims. And the only connection that so far can really be made is the fact that he's a vegan. Mm-hmm. And Xana and Maddie both worked at the Mad Greek, which is one of the best vegan, restaurants in that area of both Pullman and Moscow. So from what I've heard from...
To be clear, Mad Greek is not a exclusively vegan restaurant, but it does have a very good vegan menu from what I understand.
My sources in Pullman, if you're a vegan in Pullman, you have been to the Mad Greek many times. It is one of your go-to places. Do we know if there's any connection to the two victims who worked at the Mad Greek, Xana and Maddie, and this photograph?
Sure. Well, what I would say is that, we reported about a month ago that he had been to the Mad Greek, and then the Mad Greek came out with a statement that basically said, somebody is trying to cash in on 15 minutes of fame, I think referring to the former employee who had given that information up. But they never, ever denied for sure that he was there. They just said somebody is trying to cash in on some fame here.
I do believe, how would you know? I mean, they were definitely trying to distance their restaurant from this case, but I do believe that he would have gone to the Mad Greek, especially if it was known for having a good vegan menu, and we know that he was vegan, so why wouldn't he have gone?
So, I think that we can pretty much surmise that, the restaurant, the phone, all of this type of stuff is something that police have looked into very, very carefully to make sure that they understand kind of the timeline of how did these girls, or at least how did one of these girls, get onto Bryan Kohberger's radar? And he did somehow, or she did somehow. Somehow he found her and targeted her, allegedly. And so that was really, what the cops are looking at right now.
And then,
so it does make sense to me that he would have either honed in on one of the victims, either through social media, through Instagram or something like that. But it could also be that he honed in on them because he did see them while he was on campus at the University of Idaho, which I just showed you he was there, according to New York Post had 3 sources. People Magazine had 2, so multiple sources saw him on campus. And again, he attended Washington State University, so there would be no reason. And then we have an employee from the Mad Greek who had come out with a receipt, not receipt, but not a receipt, but proof that. Well, let me just say, an employee from the Mad Greek who was an eyewitness. And the proof, they did show proof to the journalist that they had worked at the Mad Greek, so they did have to prove it. So it wasn't just somebody looking for 15 minutes of fame. It was an employee at the Mad Greek that said Bryan Kohberger had been there. The owners first tried to say that he hadn't been there, and then they kind of backed off that and said, well, maybe he was there. I'm just really curious what you guys think, and we have a lot more to go through. We're going to be talking about Spotify and why law enforcement was so intent on getting access to Bryan Kohberger's Spotify. And then we're going to go through some more items that were found and how this pertains to the case. But, I think the fact that he was on the University of Idaho campus, seen by different people in the cafeteria at the student union drinking water. And I think you need a student ID to get in there. So, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they didn't require one. And then we have, the warrants for Apple and Spotify. And then we have this Glock. We're going to talk about the Glock also in just a moment. But let's finish listening to this because I do think this has a lot of value. And then we're going to dig into Spotify next.
And just one more clarity on your exclusive, and it's pictures plural, right? It's not just one picture. He had pictures plural of at least one victim.
Right. Then that could be 2. That could be 450. We don't know. We just know it's more than one. You can have a picture of somebody on your phone and not be fixated on that person. But more than one certainly means that, whether or not he took more than one, I'm the worst. When I take pictures of my food, I take 4 pictures of it. So, it could have been something like that. Or it could be that he downloaded things from her Instagram or screenshotted things from her Instagram. So
yeah, that's the other thing, right? Because we don't know if it's downloaded or if they were actually snapped on his phone. There's no way to tell between that. Well, at least they're not telling us. They would know.
They're not telling us, but they certainly know, because every picture you take, it tells, you can figure out exactly where a picture was taken, when it was taken, all of that. And people who know a lot more about computers than I do can figure that out.
So I think, that pretty much sums up what I wanted to go into on that. We're going to be talking about the Glock. Let me check in with chat, and then we're going to dig into this some more. But I do think that one of these on its own maybe wouldn't be such a big deal. But I think, it is cumulative, right? It is cumulative. Things are pieces are starting to come together. We have 2 eyewitnesses, 3 according to the New York Post, but 2 that I cited today that saw him on the University of Idaho campus, just, again, a school he didn't attend, in the student union, sipping water. So it wasn't like he was there because he loved the food so much. He's just sipping water and staring to the point that it made her uncomfortable. So was he hunting at the University of Idaho? Allegedly, he's innocent until proven guilty. Then we have the fact that we have multiple sources telling us that he was following the 2 of the girls on Instagram and messaging one of the girls, who I believe, according to what Steve and Christy Goncalves have said, is Maddie. And we have, again, multiple news sources, putting this out there. And this is why the judge had to clamp down on the gag order. And then we have, these pictures on the phone, and people will say, yeah, but it's, it was the case that happened in town. It was normal for him. It wouldn't be that unusual to have pictures on the phone. I think it depends on what kind of pictures they are and how many. But when you add that, but I don't know how many people that have pictures of the victims on their phones also have their DNA on the knife sheet. So again, I think one thing by itself isn't a big deal, but what the prosecution is going to be building, and this is a circumstantial case, is they're building up brick by brick, piece by piece. And I just wanted to show you that he has multiple connections to the victims, including having victims on his phone. And I didn't even go into today, and I'm not going to, but the ID that was found inside a glove, inside a box at his parents' Albrightsville, Pennsylvania house. If that links back to Bryan Kohberger, that is going to be a huge thing for the prosecution to have to overcome. So, I just think that as more information is coming to light, I can see, this really is going to be I think it's going to be a really big trial. I think we're going to learn a lot more. So I do think that he was not stalking. The stalking statute doesn't apply, but he was surveilling. And so I do think that that's, the fact that he was, making young women uncomfortable, I think is significant. So let me check in with chat, and then we're going to talk about the Spotify warrant and what that means. Let me go down. I'm like behind on chat. So sorry, you guys. Let me see where we're at. So tell me what you guys think about this. Tell me where you're from. Blackhawk says the ID they found in his possession. I want to see if that's true and who the IDs were of. It's just one ID, of one of the victims that was found inside a glove, inside the box at his parents' Albrightsville, Pennsylvania home. So I think that, if this turns out to be the case, and this ID was found inside a glove, inside a box at his parents' Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, I think this will be as damaging, maybe more damaging than the DNA evidence, if this links back to one of the victims. Because how would one of the victims get inside a glove, inside a box, all the way to Albrightsville, Pennsylvania? Yeah, surveillance. That's the word we're going to use, not stalking, surveillance. Because that's what I think he was doing. Thank you so much for modding today. And Jazz, Brother Mike Pepper. Thank you to our mods and channel members. The Jewel says she thinks it was Maddie. Jackson says, I'd like to know who the DNA was found besides BK's. Well, that's a great question. And I think the fact that Ann Taylor and the defense team want to suppress it is interesting. Because I think if it exonerated Bryan Kohberger, you would let it in, right? You would just be, I want to have that in. I don't want to suppress that, because I think that helps the defense team. But she was trying to suppress it. And I'm not sure. So this is what I think. This is, this is speculation warning. I think the DNA that was found underneath Maddie's fingernails is what Jackson is talking about, was, under Maddie's fingernails. We know that Ann Taylor's objection was that they had counted one of the three DNAs as being Maddie's. And I don't know what the judge is going to think about that. I don't think that dog is going to hunt, because it was Maddie's fingernail. So of course, your fingernails have DNA. So of course, one of the three would have been Maddie's. So Ann Taylor's objection is that they said one of the three was Maddie. And that's her objection that we know so far. So we'll have to wait to find out more. The other DNA, I believe, was Kaylee. And then the third DNA was statistically, but not in the octillion to Bryan Kohberger. Now, this is according to the defense team, but statistically, sounds like the prosecution, we don't know to what statistic. Is it 50%? Is it 5%? Is it 90%? But statistically, it was a match to Bryan Kohberger. So Ann Taylor wants that suppressed. And again, if it's good for the defense team, Ann Taylor wants to let it in. If it's bad for the defense team, Ann Taylor is filing motions to suppress. So we have motions to suppress the Vans shoe print, which I did a video on that, which I put out yesterday. And I thought what Ann Taylor didn't say on the Vans shoe print was just as interesting. Let me know what you think. I thought it was just as interesting as what she did say. What she did, maybe more interesting, what she did not say was to exclude the Vans shoe print because it wasn't the same size as Bryan Kohberger's shoe. She didn't say that. She also didn't say, I want to exclude the Vans shoe print because Bryan Kohberger never bought or owned Vans shoes. She didn't say that either. And the Vans shoe print has a very distinct diamond pattern on the bottom. So she didn't say it wasn't his size. And she didn't say he had never owned a pair of Vans shoes. So, I don't know. Why didn't she use that to argue her motion? Why just say it wasn't going in the right direction for the patio door? And therefore, she wanted to suppress the Vans shoe. The judge said no. And I'm not going to dig into it because a lot of you guys already watched the video yesterday. But if you didn't see that video, I think it's like 8 or 9 minutes long. It's definitely worth watching. Hey, Donna, thank you. Blackhawk says, if it's true that he was caught with other women's IDs in his possession, it's damaging. Yeah. And I think having, it's cumulative. So it's not just going to be that there's an employee that comes out and says they saw him at the Mad Greek. It's not just going to be there were students that attended University of Idaho that come out and say, Bryan Kohberger was sitting inside the student union when he didn't go to school here, sipping water in the cafeteria. It's not just going to be a WSU student who says that he tended and befriended her and staged a break-in into her house so that he could install cameras and spy on her. It's not just going to be that he had victims of the IDs on his cell phone of one of the victims. It's not just going to be that he was following the victims on Instagram. I think it's going to be cumulative. And then this, I think the jury, it's, it has to be with beyond a reasonable doubt. And I think we are seeing that there is a lot of evidence, a lot more than we knew about initially. Again, Bryan Kohberger is innocent until proven guilty. Penjam says, I kind of think the photos and DNA will be equal importance. I think they will be too. In particular, I think that ID that was found inside the glove, inside a box, all the way in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, inside his parents' house, I think that if that links back, if that's ID of any of the victims or anyone living at the 1122 King Road house, I think that will, and that's what we're hearing, but we haven't had a confirmation about it. We won't probably know till the trial. But if that turns out to be true, that will be worse, in my opinion, for the defense than just the DNA. And then the DNA on the fingernails, I see people saying just a lot of misunderstandings about this. The reason we know about this is Ann Taylor filed a motion to suppress this evidence. And suppress means she doesn't want the jury to see it. She doesn't want it to be part of the trial. So if this DNA underneath Maddie's fingernails didn't link back statistically to Bryan Kohberger to a point where she was concerned about it, she would be wanting it to come in because it would help her to say that somebody else was there. Somebody else committed this crime. Somebody else planted the knife sheath. But the fact that she doesn't want this to come in, the DNA found underneath Maddie's fingernail clippings underneath her nails, I think that's a big problem. Yeah, a lot of misinformation, Momo's thinking. Mike, it's me, Mike says, no other DNA is related to the crime, obviously. Well, we'll see. And a lot of people have talked about the glove. So I do want to talk about that. The glove that glove was found, I think, the crimes happened on November 13th. I don't think the gloves were found. That glove outside the house was found until after Thanksgiving. So I just want to say that whatever DNA was on a glove that was found outside after Thanksgiving, that's almost 2 weeks later. I don't think that's going to be a big thing for the prosecution to overcome. Ann Taylor can put it out there and try to poke holes, but I don't think that glove is, I don't think that's going to really mean that much. Again, it was found on I believe the 27th of November, so 2 weeks later. I could be off on the date by 1 or 2 days, but it was, after Thanksgiving that glove was found outside the 1122 King Road house. People dropped gloves. There were CSI people. There was, law enforcement going in and out of the house. It could have been a garbage man dropped it. It could have been a student going by that, was paying their respects to the victims. So, but and then the blood inside the house, a lot of people said that. Now, I think Ann Taylor can bring that up, and I think she can use that to cause reasonable doubt. But we also know that, there was a party at the house that week at some point at the 1122 King Road house. And so it could have also happened at that party. And you remember when you saw Xana's bag, her DoorDash bag from Taco Bell, that was sitting by the sink and that it was kind of a mess. They hadn't cleaned up from that party yet. So the DNA could have been from the party. It could be from the perpetrator that night. It could be from a year ago. Somebody had a little cut in the kitchen and, went upstairs to wash their hands. I don't know, but all we know is that it's male. So maybe Ann Taylor can use that. What do you guys think? Top Cat says surveilling and peeping in windows for months, I think. So a lot of people think that Bryan Kohberger was sitting up in the apartment complex that was located behind the 1122 King Road house, which would have given him Maddie's room would have almost been like a goldfish bowl. You would have been looking right into it. And I think it might have been even more than that too, Top Cat. I think that maybe Bryan Kohberger was also linking in, and the reason that Kaylee didn't get her Apple Watch or her Bluetooth back, her dad did not get that back. He was wondering why he didn't get that back. I think it's because Kaylee had a Bluetooth. And we've talked about geofencing, but I think it's very possible that the reason we have 51, 52 terabytes of information to go through on this case is because geofencing is being utilized, and that Kaylee's phone, it's not just the 11 phone pings leading up to the crime, but that her phone may have been offering Bryan Kohberger's a handshake every time he parked behind the house. He also could have been using blue snarfing to hack in and see. So I think what the pictures are, were these public pictures or were these pictures that he got by using blue snarfing to hack into Kaylee? Were these pictures he took himself from sitting behind the house? I think what the pictures are will also be, something that will go a long way to helping the jury decide on this case. Thank you for modding today, Pepper. Thank you, Truth Seeker. Grand B said, an innocent man doesn't sit silent in jail. An innocent man never stops talking, trying to prove his innocence. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. And Blackhouse says, camera on the left at the front door. I don't know what you're trying to say. AT is pulling all the stops. Ann Taylor, yeah, she is. I mean, she's doing a great job defending Bryan Kohberger. Her job is she only needs one juror to get a hung jury, right? So she is, she's going in and she, is putting through, she's trying to suppress. But for people who have been, claiming that there's no evidence, Ann Taylor has been trying to suppress a lot of the evidence that's coming in. And so, and this is just what we've seen. Like I said, I still think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. So there is evidence. So it'll just be up to a jury to decide. And we don't get to decide. The prosecution doesn't get to decide, and Ann Taylor doesn't get to decide what the jury gets to see. Now, the judge did rule that the van's footprint is coming in. The judge did rule that testimony from Dylan and Bethany are both coming in. And a lot of people have been wondering about Bethany. Well, I believe that I don't think Dylan and Bethany are going to be as important to the prosecution. They might be to the defense. Because she can poke holes, saying, that they were drunk and they didn't call 911. But I don't think that their testimony is going to be that important to the prosecution's case, in my opinion. I think the most important things for the prosecution are going to be proving connections from Bryan Kohberger to the victims, showing that he was surveilling them, linking geofencing to his cell phone. And we do know that, there were multiple warrants, linking him not just DNA on the knife sheath, but actually showing that he purchased that knife on Amazon. And we know Ann Taylor tried to keep that out. And she used the word purchased twice in her motion. So I do believe in the reporting that I reported out to you guys last year that Bryan Kohberger did purchase that knife, that K-bar knife, in the spring of 2022. And I believe that they were purchased on Amazon. But I think that the prosecution's even gone a step further, and we're going to talk about Spotify in just a second, but I think they've gone even a step further in all of this, because they're not only trying to link him to the purchase of the knife sheath, they're also trying to get, from all their bank warrants and all of that, I think they're trying to link up what he purchased on Amazon. And we know Ann Taylor, what was her thing? Her thing was the algorithm made him buy the knife sheath. His parents' searches, he was offered up the knife sheath to buy it. He bought it. I don't think a jury is really going to buy that, being that his DNA was on that knife sheath, and the knife sheath where it was found, it was underneath and to the side of Maddie. I think that's going to be an uphill battle. Let me know if you see things differently, because we're not going to all agree on every single case, and that's okay. We don't all have to agree on all the cases. I'm just going to bring you all of the information, and you guys can make up your own mind about it. Unspoken Heart Stillness says, a fact, he showed up at the swimming pool. He freaked them out, and they left. I don't know anything about the swimming pool. Do you have a source for that? Mike's, I would love to check it out if you do. Mike says the DNA is likely her own and Kaylee's, and BK may be inconclusive. Right. I agree. And I think, the prosecution, this was presented to the grand jury, whatever it was. We don't know. We just know Ann Taylor's characterization of it. We haven't heard the prosecution's characterization of it. So we don't know, but we know it was presented to the grand jury. Now, a grand jury, the prosecution is, required to present everything. But the fact that Ann Taylor doesn't want this jury to see it in the upcoming trial, to me, makes me think that this DNA is maybe inconclusive, but she doesn't like that likelihood ratio, the LR. She doesn't like the LR, the likelihood ratio. She doesn't like that. If that likelihood ratio was really low, like 1%, 2%, she would probably love it because it would help Bryan Kohberger. But whatever it is, it's got to be, more than 5 or 10%, maybe more than 50%. She doesn't like the ratio, and we don't know what it is. So it's really frustrating. Thank you so much for modding, Pepper. Thank you, and Jazz. Mama says DNA wasn't found. I don't think, I won't believe it was on the sheath if I'm wrong. DNA wasn't found, I don't think. Yeah, it was found on the sheath. BK's DNA was found on the knife sheath, on the snap, underneath, inside the snap, underneath, and to the side of Maddie. It was, so I just want to confirm that for you. Blackhawk said he's a student, he isn't cooking much. Raquel said, true, but again, anything you say can be used and held against you. That's true. So, that's a fair point. Why would you speak out if anything you say can be used against you in a court of law? He might be, being told by Ann Taylor to not talk. So I don't, he doesn't have to take the stand, but do you think he will? Do you think he will take the stand to provide an alibi for himself? Because the only alibi we have right now is that he was out stargazing and moon gazing. But as I showed you in the live stream 2 weeks ago, it was foggy that night. It was foggy that night. It was cloudy. So how much could you really see on that night? And I think that we're going to see weather experts at the trial. This trial is going to take 3 months. That's how much evidence there is in this trial. So it's going to be a battle of the experts, that's for sure. Mike said there's no other suspects, so BK would be singing if he had help. Jackson says, I don't think Kaylee's would be considered unknown, but I guess we'll find out. No, just one of the 3 was considered unknown. So I think that Maddie is one. Kaylee, so speculation alert. Maddie was one. We know it was Maddie. It was her fingernail. So of course, so Ann Taylor's argument that, we don't know that it was Maddie's DNA. Well, it was her fingernails. So yes, it was. Your DNA is in your fingernails. So it was underneath her fingernails. Of course, it's her DNA. So, but that was her argument. And again, just because Ann Taylor says it doesn't mean it's true. It doesn't mean it's not true. It just, I saw some people reporting out that this was fact. This is Ann Taylor's trying to get this evidence suppressed. If this was good for Bryan Kohberger, she would want to have it in. The other one, I believe, is Kaylee. And then the third one, and this is speculation, that Ann Taylor doesn't like this likelihood ratio that the prosecution has of Bryan Kohberger. So I believe those are going to be the 3 DNAs. Kaylee, of course. She was in the bed with Maddie. Maddie, of course. It was her fingernails. Of course, her DNA's in her own fingernails. And then the third one, if that's Bryan Kohberger, in and of itself, but you combine that with the knife sheath, with the 11 cell phone pings, with some geofencing, with the fact that he had pictures of the victims on his phone, the fact that he was hanging out at University of Idaho, you start, adding things together, and it gets harder for Ann Taylor. Yeah, please give this a thumbs up. Let the algorithm know. Don't hate the journalist that's bringing you the information. I'm just want to give you guys all the facts so you can make up your own mind. You can always, hi Kaylee, I'm glad to see you. You can always back up the live stream to the beginning and watch it that way too, you guys. I don't know if you guys knew that. Mike says you maybe have the unknown DNA mixed up with the inconclusive under Maddie's nails. Hi Leslie. I'm glad you guys are here. Thanks for modding Kaylee and Leslie. Wicked agrees with you. Let's see what else. Let me take a couple more comments and we're going to dig into the Spotify warrant. There's more DNA in that house than 3 unknown. None of it is related to the crime. Well, yeah, they had a party there that week. So, yeah, there's probably tons of DNA. in the house. I mean, it was a party house. We saw video footage of parties being held at that house when the victims weren't even home. The roommates that lived at the house weren't home, and people were there having parties at the house. So, lots of people were in and out. Bryan says they say he probably had done this before. No, I don't think so. I haven't seen anything that says that he done anything like this before. The only thing that I saw that I thought was, somewhat of a problem, and I don't know if the prosecution is going to bring this up or not, is the WSU colleague that went to WSU with him, that said that she's a female, said that he was tending and befriending her, and then she believes he broke into her house, moved some stuff around, and so I'm wondering if the prosecution has video footage. He was reportedly, allegedly watching her. He used this stage to, I mean, this just shows you, to me, mastermind level. The fact that he, staged a break-in by moving things around, tended and befriended her, offered to install a security system inside her house, and then used that security system to watch her is really shocking. And that is what she is claiming. And again, not everybody, why would she be claiming this? She has no dog in this hunt. So he's done some crazy things. I mean, that's really, really bad. Claire said, how could this come out about the pictures when there is a gag order? Well, that's why there was a second gag order. So the first one wasn't strong enough, and then the second one included everybody. And this is why people are like, oh, the roommates. So much was able to be attributed to the roommates. And all we know are the text messages. We don't know about the phone calls. We haven't heard their side of it yet. And they have not broken that gag order. They could have sold their story. They could have done an interview and gotten paid for it. They could have cashed in. They could have written a book. They haven't done any of those things. They have honored this gag order and are going to be testifying at the trial. Ann Taylor also didn't want either Bethany or Dylan to be allowed to testify. So now she doesn't want the words bushy eyebrows to be allowed to come in. I don't think that dog is going to hunt. Let me know what you think about that one. Jackson Mean says there was also unknown blood DNA on the railing. Right. And I just talked about that. I think your comment got put up before I talked about that. So I hope I've addressed that. Rachel says a picture raises concern. Yeah, and it's not picture, it's plural. Photos on his phone of one of the victims. So is it 2 photos? Is it 20 photos? Is it 50 photos? How many photos? Are these photos that he downloaded on the internet? Are these photos that he took himself? Was he at University of Idaho taking pictures? We also know about that traffic stop that the prosecution wasn't allowed to get in. They wanted to get in this traffic stop that was near the mall because the victims were at the mall at the same time. They wanted to prove that Bryan Kohberger was surveilling them, and that was shut down. The judge said, no, I'm not letting that in. It's too prejudicial. But now the prosecution is doing an end run around. They want to still get this in, but now they're saying, well, we want to use the traffic stop solely for the purpose of identifying Bryan Kohberger as the owner of the Hyundai Elantra. And listen, if that Hyundai Elantra, Ann Taylor also wants the video from the 111 from the camera. Oh, I can't think of. I don't want to say the wrong address. So she wants one video from one of the cameras not to be allowed in. I think it's going to be allowed in because she's saying it's not continuous. And just because it is Bryan Kohberger's car doesn't mean that he was the one that went to the 1122 King Road house. But again, I think that's why she had to put him in the car driving around. I've always been honest with you guys. I've told you guys what I think, which is that I believe that there is video footage and she's only shown us 2 pictures. People who are saying, oh, the pictures don't show enough. Well, we haven't seen the video. Let's see what the prosecution brings in. Let's look at the video. She's just shown 2 pictures that she cherry picked out that she says doesn't clearly identify it. Of course, she's not going to put one of him behind the wheel of the car and put that in her motion that, could get out to the public. She's a good lawyer. But we haven't, so before we dismiss this video based off of 2 images provided by the defense, I think it's only fair to just wait till the trial and let's watch the video together as a true crime community. I am going to be airing the trial on this channel. Thank you so much for modding today, Anjaz. Rand says, the fact that we never heard BK say that he was innocent says a lot. He couldn't even say the words not guilty. I don't know if he, why he stood silent. I don't, and remember, everyone's innocent until proven guilty. I don't know what that was about. But I don't know. I understand how you feel, though. I don't want to dismiss your feelings. Blackhawk says DNA mixture under Maddie's nails could be her own. Well, yeah, I agree. Maddie's boyfriend and Kaylee, easy to get skin cells under your nails. All you have to do is be scratching someone's back. Well, I told you, Ann Taylor's objection to this DNA coming in. Remember, it's not the prosecution that's objecting to this DNA evidence coming in. It's Ann Taylor, the defense team, who's objecting. And they don't like the likelihood ratio of the third DNA that is a likelihood ratio that links back to Bryan Kohberger. She doesn't like that. But her argument is that that she thought that the likelihood ratio was off because they assumed that one of the 3 DNAs was Maddie's. Well, of course. And to me, that's like, I think this is going to be let in. I don't think she's going to win this motion, just like she did not win the Van Shoe motion. I mean, of course, your fingernails have DNA on them. So, of course, one of the 3 would be Maddie. I believe the second one is going to be Kaylee, and I believe the third one is going to be a likelihood ratio. I don't know how much, 5%, 25%, 50%, 90%, I don't know, back to Bryan Kohberger. So, yeah, great comment, Blackhawk. Mike thinks he had a list of targets. You think he was hunting that when he was sitting at the University of Idaho? I don't know. Brian says the party house true, although many people knew the passcode to the backdoor entrance, might it narrow down to a few dozen, maybe 100 something. Well, I know law enforcement worked from the inside out, right? Hold on one second. Thank you. Law enforcement worked from the inside out. So we know that their interviews with Dylan and Bethany, they weren't just like nice, sweet little interviews. They interrogated the 2 roommates. They interrogated, everybody in the circle. And then they widened it a little bit more. And meanwhile, then when they got the DNA back on the knife sheath, they're like, holy moly, this isn't linked to anybody that the victims actually knew. This was somebody who, wanted to make a name for himself, allegedly. He's innocent until proven guilty. Rochelle does not think he was alone. I think just knowing what we know about Bryan Kohberger, I think that he was probably alone. I think that what we know about him is that he, was kind of a loner. He went on a blind date with a woman. He texted her later. She had nice birthing hips. In high school, he was removed from his high school program. I showed you guys the receipts on that in a video that I did a couple of weeks ago in a live stream where he was removed from his high school for having problems with women. So, and the 7 Sirens, I showed you guys that last week where he had problems at the 7 Sirens back when he was going to DeSales, working on his master's degree with female servers and females that were in the 7 Sirens tavern or bar. So according to the owner of the 7 Sirens, again, he doesn't have a dog in this hunt. Hey, Holly. Diana said, 1 photo of any of those girls. It is creepy. How many girly pictures did he have? Well, we don't know, but I do think that, it does show that there are connections to these victims. So, remember Ann Taylor announced that, but she announced it, almost 2 years ago that there were no connections. This is before she got all of the stuff turned over. We know she didn't have everything because she was saying she didn't have everything. And then I've had people ask me about the delay. I just wanted to address that. Bryan Kohberger had a right to a speedy trial. We all do in the United States. Bryan Kohberger and Ann Taylor waived his right to a speedy trial. Now, I think they made a big mistake. I think that had they gone forward, I don't think the prosecution, knowing now that there's, 51, 52 terabytes of evidence, I don't think that the prosecution could have possibly been ready for a trial had they gone forward then and pressed his right to a speedy trial. He, might be out now, but he waived his right to a speedy trial. And then the delay is Ann Taylor delaying, claiming she doesn't have stuff. But to be fair to the prosecution, they have to go through the same amount of data that she has to go through. This 52 terabytes of information, they're only at like 2 or 3 weeks ahead of Ann Taylor. So they're having to go through, if you think about how much storage your computer has, my computer has a half a terabyte. Half. 52 terabyte. And I edit videos on this computer. I do use external drive to back up stuff and store stuff, but I use this computer for, pretty heavy duty stuff. 52 terabytes is a lot of work. And the prosecution, to be fair to them, because Ann Taylor was saying they didn't turn over this or that or this or that, I understand. They're only 2 or 3 weeks ahead of Ann Taylor on going through all of this. So if she needed until the summer of 2025 to go through everything, so did the prosecution. They, were only 2 or 3 weeks ahead of her. So I just want to, just put that out there. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Top Cat says, forensic psychs have said he was probably fantasizing about this for a long time. Yeah, there's been a lot of people that feel like, professionals. And I showed an interview with Jim Clemente, who's a criminal profiler, during our last live stream that I thought was really, really interesting, where he, had a similar take as you, Top Cat. It's me, Mike says, I doubt the slider needed a code. No, I don't think so. I think this is what I think happened. Speculation alert. This is what I think happened. I think, and let me know if you have a different theory. This is what I think happened. I think the perpetrator, so I'm just going to talk about it in terms of a perpetrator. I think the perpetrator came in through the patio doors, the second floor patio doors, because the house sits on the hill, right? So he came in. I don't think the door was closed. I think the perpetrator left the door open because he did not want to get his DNA any more places than he absolutely had to. I think he carried with him a K-ill kit. K-ill kit. Watch when you're talking about stuff like this, don't use the M word or the K word, because we don't know the algorithm sorts it out. I won't get to read your comments. So then I think this is what, Dylan saw in his hand. But I think that the perpetrator came in and went straight upstairs, which is why I believe that Maddie was the target. It's possible it could be Kaylee, and Kaylee told her parents that she thought somebody was following her. Steve and Christy told us that early on. But I do believe that the target was Maddie, just based on Steve and Christy saying that, BK was liking Maddie's photos, being that he was DMing, being that he had photos of one of the victims on his phone. Photos, plural. So I think that he came in and went straight upstairs and did what he did. I'm watching my words here. I don't think it sounded like what we think it sounded like. I do think that these young women fought back. And maybe that's how Maddie got DNA that, according to the likelihood ratio that Ann Taylor doesn't want the jury to see, matched Bryan Kohberger. I think that because he was not expecting Kaylee to be in the same bed with Maddie, that it didn't go the way he planned, and this is how he lost that knife sheath, which was found underneath and to the side of Maddie with his DNA on the inside snap. I think in the meantime, Xana had gotten her DoorDash delivery prior to his arrival, the perpetrator. She came out and she would have felt the slider door. It was cold. It was November. So she would have felt this cold air. And I think that's who Dylan heard call out, there's someone here. It could have been Kaylee or Maddie calling for help, but it also could have been Xana, who we know came out because that DoorDash bag was left on the kitchen counter next to the sink. We know because we've seen the photos of it with her name on it. So, and I think that he would have come rushing down the stairs at that point and, chased her back into the room and, did away with Xana and Ethan. And then we know Dylan opened her door once, twice, and the third time she saw somebody with bushy eyebrows who's 6 feet tall or taller, who was dressed all in black, who was athletic, but not muscular, athletic, but not muscular, with bushy eyebrows. And And the law enforcement, I think where we get the frozen shock phase is not that she was in frozen shock phase, obviously, from the text messages. They were in a panic. So there wasn't a frozen shock phase. But I think law enforcement would have said, when you saw him, why didn't he do away with you? Because again, they're interrogating Dylan at this point. She's a suspect. And, I think that's where we get I was frozen in a shock phase. I was in frozen shock phase. I just froze. I startled. And we know from seeing the text messages that she was scared. Now, we also heard from Steve Goncalves, I played that interview, that it was really common, I guess, in that house for the girls to play pranks on each other. I think Dylan and Bethany were genuinely upset, but they had multiple police calls out. From my understanding, the house was on probation. They couldn't afford to have any more law enforcement being called out to the house. Or they were going to get a fine, and so maybe they were reluctant. Maybe they were reluctant to call 911 because they were drinking, and they were impaired. So that's what I think happened. And then I think the perpetrator, what Dylan saw was with his kit. I think he then went to the door, and we have heard that Bethany, because remember, Ann Taylor's investigator was wanting to interview Bethany, and they didn't know that this grand jury indictment had already happened. They were preparing for a preliminary hearing or preliminary trial at this point. And Bethany was like, nope, I'm not going to interview with you. No, I'm not going to interview with you. And finally, she did agree to interview with them. And I think, what Bethany knew that Ann Taylor didn't know at that point was that she didn't want to interview with them because there wasn't going to be a preliminary trial. That wasn't going to happen. She knew she had already testified to the grand jury. But she did agree to sit down with Ann Taylor's investigator. And from what I've heard from the judge, and also what was reported out by the Mirror, is what Bethany saw was somebody taking off something and dropping it into a bag. And this is how the judge, in this Ada County judge, also describes it. So that's what I think happened. And I think that Bethany and Dylan both saw the same perpetrator. To me, Mike's a lot of connections. Yeah, I haven't heard Ann Taylor recently say that there's been no connections. She said that, probably almost 2 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. My daughter used to follow Maddie with Insta or TikTok. I forget which. I do want to say thank you to Mike for the super sticker. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you to NJAS for the gifted reporter room membership. If you got that membership, please tell us who you are. Thank you so much, NJAS and Brother Mike. They are both head mods along with 6 Cents Amelia. Christina says she cannot wait until the trial. Divine Timing says, hi, just hit a thumbs up. Wow, can't believe he had a photo of the victims in his phone. Was it confirmed other girl's ID? Was it confirmed I'm not sure I understand. If you could clarify that, that would be great. All right, so let's dig into this, the Spotify warrant, and then we're going to talk about the Glock that he had at his parents' house. I do want to say thank you to our producers, Enja, Sasha Angel, and Not Ending, George Brown, Pepper, and Lisa Fazio. Thank our channel members. I just don't want to leave this till the very last thing. I'm not ending. I still have a bunch more stuff to go through, but I do want to just thank you guys for your support. If you would like your name to appear just like this in all of my live streams and videos, hit the join button. It's next to the subscribe button. But subscribing helps me too, and subscribing is free. So thank you so much to all of you. If you are a channel member and you don't see your name up here, let me know. And thank you, super thanks and coffee gratitude for the last couple of live streams. I really appreciate you guys, and thank you for your gifted channel membership. And Jazz, Kami, and Pepper, thank you so much. If I have left anybody's name out, let me know. Okay, so let's get back into this. Let's talk about the Glock, and then we'll get into the Spotify. Let me take this down. Okay, so this is the warrant, and we know that there was a ski mask collected. And we know that now, we didn't know this before, but we know now that it wasn't just a regular, hospital mask, but what Dylan said was that it was, quote, like a ski mask. So I think if this ends up being the ski mask, again, in and of itself won't be anything, but you start adding it to other things, and it gets to be a problem. So let's go through this Glock. Why did he have the Glock? Why did he have the ammunition? And I just do want to show you the receipts. I told you guys that he didn't have an Apple laptop. It was an Acer. You can see right here, Acer number 7. We know that the knife was not recovered at his parents' Albrightsville, Pennsylvania house. But he did have 3 other knives, including one in another sheath. Police also seized a black mask, which is not dissimilar to the black ski mask described by Dylan, who saw the perpetrator. And again, this mask in and of itself, lots of people probably have something like this, especially if you live, somewhere cold like Idaho or Washington. But again, it's cumulative. It just keeps adding up. So why did he have this Glock at his parents' house? Was this brought with him to the crime scene? Was this just something that he carried? Like, why did he have this on him? And also, why did he have a DNA kit? If you look here, there's swabs. So was he touching things? Was he feeling paranoid about the fact that he had left that knife sheath there? And I believe that's why he went back the morning of the crimes. I think that may have been when the van's shoe print was left. It may not have been left during the actual committing of the crimes. It may have been left the next morning. Remember, neighbors reported seeing that front door wide open. So why did he have a DNA kit with him? Was he touching things and then testing his own DNA at his parents' house? I just think it's, again, and then we have this book we still don't have an answer for of underlining on page 118. A lot of people have thought that this may be linked back to Papa Roger and back to Elliot Roger. So very, very interesting. He had dark clothing. I don't think that's a big deal. I think everybody has dark clothing. But then we have these swabs. Again, this DNA kit that was found inside the white Hyundai Elantra, and maybe some little cleaning Q-tips. We'll find out. One buccal swab. Here it is. Look at that. One buccal swab. And then some people have said that he did not wear a size 13. Well, I think he did, because this says a pair of black and white size 13 Nike shoes. So, maybe. But why did he have the Glock? Why was he carrying the Glock? Why was he carrying ammunition for the Glock? What would this, what was he planning to use this for? Was this brought with him to the crime scene? So let's talk about some of the things that we're seeing here on this list. Okay, so I just want to go through this. So the book with the underlining on page 118, we don't know what this is. I don't know how significant it is. I do think it's somewhat significant because law enforcement clocked it in their affidavit. So some people have speculated that this was a book by Elliot Rogers. The AT&T bill was on there as listed as gotten. Now we know Bryan Kohberger had AT&T, so this would have been a way for them, and we know that multiple AT&T warrants were gotten. This Glock 22 Gen S40 caliber, serial number BMXVSQI, and I think the fact that he had the Glock with ammunition at his parents' Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. This wasn't a hunting. For those of you that don't know, a Glock is a pistol. So many people have wondered, why did the perpetrator choose to use a knife over using a gun? And in my opinion, a knife would have been quieter, but it also would have been more personal. And I do think that however this started, I think it started with infatuation. And when his feelings about this victim weren't being reciprocated, she wasn't answering his Instagram DMs. I think that infatuation feeling turned into hate. Again, I don't think these victims had any idea who the perpetrator was. We know that there was a Smith & Wesson pocket knife. There was a folder containing vehicle paperwork. There was the Acer laptop. So many people have wondered if BK had an Apple phone. I don't know what kind of phone he had. That's such a good comment. Somebody left that for me. But we do know that the Apple that his laptop was not, and his all-in-one HP computer that was also seized was also a HP, a Hewlett Packard, not Apple. The black gloves, if BK had black gloves, it's possible. You know, it's just kind of odd. The black hat, black gloves. I think this is another brick in the wall, in my opinion, for the prosecution, just to have just the mask. If it's, you know, similar to what Dylan saw. So does BK wear a size 13? So my source on this is the Idaho Statesman, and they said that that law enforcement did find a size 3 pair of Nike shoes, and that these shoes were at Bryan Kohberger's parents' all Brightsville, Pennsylvania home. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is that when Ann Taylor was making motions to exclude, to suppress the van's shoe print, which she lost that motion. But what she didn't say, I think, is as interesting as what she did say. Her reasoning was it wasn't going in the direction that Dylan had told law enforcement, and therefore it should be suppressed. What she did not say, and I think she's a good enough lawyer that if this was the case, is that it didn't match Bryan Kohberger's size. That would have been something that I'm sure she would have argued if that had been the case. So I think the fact that she's trying to suppress it based on which direction the shoe print was traveling in versus the size, or the fact that Bryan Kohberger, you know, she could have said Bryan Kohberger has never owned a pair of Vans shoes. And I'm wondering if that's why we're seeing all these bank and credit card warrants that I shared with you over the past few weeks of them like showing that he did own Vans shoes, that he did wear a size 13, that this footprint is a size 13. You know, again, it's in and of itself, but you combine that with DNA on the knife sheath and the other things that we've been talking about, it starts to add up. The laptop with damage. Now, I don't know if this damaged laptop was damaged intentionally or not. We know from the Chris Watts case that Nicole Kessinger was telling him to delete everything, wipe everything from your phone, but they were still able to get some information off of NK's phone and some information from Chris Watts' phone. So law enforcement could still get some forensic information off of a laptop, even if it was wiped or damaged. But I'm just curious if the damage was done intentionally. So I do want to know more about the record of the sale of this Glock 22 Gen S 40 caliber. It would be interesting to find out when he purchased this. Was it before or after the 1122 King Road crimes? Is there any evidence that he had this? And then we have these 4 buccal swabs. That's cheek swabs, you guys. And why would he have, was he conducting, he would have known, allegedly, he's innocent until proven guilty, but he would have known that he left that knife sheath behind. And he would have been worried. In my opinion, that's why he went back the next morning to see if he could retrieve it. Maybe he dropped it outside. Maybe it was somewhere easy to get. But he would have been worried, I think, knowing that he was a criminology major, that his DNA would be on that knife sheath. And sure enough, it was. So is this why he's doing DNA tests? Is he testing himself, touching things and conducting DNA tests? Speculation alert. I don't know. And then we still don't know about these hair strands. We've heard about 8 possible hair strands and a possible animal hair strand. And we don't know anything about the animal hair strand. Did it link back to Murphy the dog or Buddy the dog? What do you guys think? Then we're going to get into the Spotify next. So let me pull that up. Let me just check in with chat. Let me just put up the faces of the victims here. Okay. Okay, I'm behind on chat. Let's see. Mamo's thinking, unless the state has more, I don't think they're going to win this case, in my opinion, in my honest opinion. And Dynamite says this is damaging for his defense, so much for Ann Taylor to have to explain away. Hey, Truth Exposed. Blackhawk says, Yep, that will be very damaging, proving he is a trophy keeper. Yeah, a lot of these guys like to keep trophies of the victims, right? They like to keep trophies. They, you know, the ID inside the glove, inside the box, could be very damaging. Maybe the ID was used to get into the Idaho University for surveillance. Well, we know from multiple people that from 3 different sources, according to the New York Post, and 2 different sources that talked to People magazine, that he was seen at the Idaho University, the University of Idaho. So yeah, again, why would he have been there? He didn't attend that school. He went to Washington State University. So why was he hanging out in their student union in their cafeteria? Was that his hunting ground? Yeah, it could have been in Idaho. That ID inside a glove, inside a box, could have been used for surveillance to get himself into the University of Idaho. You know, that's a great point. Bryan says NASA enhanced his car, leaving the scene, and it showed, quote, what appeared to be male driver. He shouldn't have used his phone or his car. He may have never been caught if not for those 2 huge errors. Blackhawk says, if that Amazon purchase is true, this is over. Bryan won't be able to recover from that. Right, and Ann Taylor, if this was good for Bryan Kohberger, Ann Taylor would not be trying to suppress the Amazon purchase. Remember, if it's good for Bryan Kohberger, Ann Taylor wants it to come in. If it's bad for Bryan Kohberger, Ann Taylor does not want it to come in. She's a good defense attorney. So, you know, my understanding is that he purchased that knife in the spring of 2022. And the fact that Ann Taylor uses the word purchase not once but twice in her own motion, and that the algorithm made him do it, was the sum of it. The sum of the motion was, it was because of other family member searches. We saw this in the Kaylee Marie. Remember when she went missing, and Casey Anthony went on trial, and it had searched for chloroform, and Cindy, her mother, got on the stand and said that it was Cindy was the one that searched for the chloroform, not Casey, to save, in case he got off. So if this comes back to the Amazon purchase, unless one of the parents gets up on the stand and says they bought the knife, I think it's a problem for him. It's me, Mike. It's possible that BK DNA, does she want it out? It's inconclusive. Her lab says it's not BK. That's a lie because she would use that. Penjam says, a total shock. And just she can't bring herself to watch anything in relation that she likes true crime. Thanks for modding today, Holly. Rochelle says, I don't know how he did this without a huge fight from the victims. Well, I do think we are learning now that there was fighting back. I just don't think it sounded like what we think it sounded like. I think part of it was just the layout of that house, right? That house had such a weird layout. Let me pull that up really quick for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about. Let me just pull up a picture of the house. Let me go back here. Okay, I think this is a really good one to show. Yeah, this one. Okay, so let me share this with you. Make sure we're all looking at the same thing. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. So for those of you who can see on this first floor, this is where Bethany was, and Dylan was on the second floor, and Kaylee and Maddie were up here on the third floor. But if you look here, it looks like there's an exterior wall on this house, and that possibly the house was originally, and that an addition was added on later. But there may be an exterior wall that would have affected how sound would have traveled from the third floor down to the second floor. Remember, who else was in the house that did not call 911 when Kaylee and Maddie were being done away with? Ethan and Xana didn't call 911 either. So I don't think this crime sounded like what we think it sounded like. And I think it may have to do with the layout of the house. Now, and the fact that people had been drinking. Ethan and Xana had been to a frat party that night. They had been drinking, probably. Kaylee and Maddie, we all saw them at the food truck getting their food, and they clearly had been drinking. And we know from Bethany and Dylan's own accounts, they haven't tried to to, make it sound better than it was. Dylan didn't pick Bryan Kohberger out of a lineup. She didn't try to, conflate or inflate her sense of importance. They haven't tried to do any of those things. And I think that the way that sound travels due to this wall right here would have affected, who heard what. Now, I think Dylan was on the second floor. I think she would have been and I think she was, on this side, but further back. I think she would have probably had the best chance to hear, but I don't know I just don't think it sounded like what we think it sounded like. I think that if you went in quick and you went for this part of the body, I'm watching my words here, that it wouldn't have sounded like what, and even if somebody was bleeding out, they could still fight back. But we do know from Maddie that the fact that she has DNA on her fingernails to me tells me that Maddie did fight back. So I hope I've answered your question. Let's see. Photos more than one. Sorry, came in late. Yeah, well, is photos plural. We don't know how many. Yeah. Red says, I'm behind on this one. Do we have a trial date? Jury selection starts July 30th of this year. Kim says, I think there's more damaging evidence against him that they're holding. Oh, yeah. We haven't, like, people kept saying there's no evidence. There's no evidence. I'm like, well, there's a gag order. So, yeah, there's no evidence because we're all under this gag order. So, of course, yeah, we don't have any evidence. But I do think that the fact that, we're just going to have to wait to the trial to see everything. But the fact that we have these 13 motions from Ann Taylor trying to suppress evidence shows that there is evidence. So I hope I've answered your question, Kim. Brian says, I'm new here. I've just followed the case since day one. Nice to see you. Nice to have you here. Dab thinks they have a light on him. Truth exposed. That's just the reality of it. Crafts and crimes, I think. Let me see. Trying to see if they have anybody that hasn't had a chance. Unspoken heart stillness says that staring is a form of harassment. Yeah, I think that if he was on campus, I mean, I don't know if you could go after somebody and get a restraining order for them just staring, but if they were following you around and staring, probably. Yeah, please leave your DNA on the thumbs up button. Help me out with the algorithm. I know that I can't get to 40,000 subscribers without your help. And if you like to have all of the information so you can make up your own mind, this is a Critical Thinkers channel. I will bring you everything. I'm here to bring you everything that I know, and I'm willing to dig and do the work. I prep for hours before I go live on this case because I'm digging into stuff to see what I can find. And sometimes it means going back years into old newspaper clippings, newspaper articles, affidavits from a year and a half, 2 years ago, and then trying to back up that with other information. So I definitely love doing it. That's one of the things that I do enjoy doing. So, but I definitely want to also bring you guys credible information. There is some speculation, obviously, but I do really try to bring you guys credible information because I think you guys deserve credible information. The Jewel says there is a pattern of circumstantial evidence. They, the jury, will see the truth. The truth will always prevail. Yeah, and we all want this to be a fair trial. Nobody wants anybody to be, scapegoated or railroaded. We all want the right person to be put behind bars. This is a capital case. Jackson says they can match the shoe print patterns to a specific shoe if they have the shoes almost like a fingerprint. Yeah, that band's shoe print, I showed that in the video that I put out, I think it was yesterday. It's only 8 or 9 minutes. It's definitely worth a watch. But that Vans shoe print, yeah, that was yesterday. The Vans shoe print is very distinct, and I did show that the bottom of that shoe on that video. Mike said the timelines of video in town match his movements. Truth Exposed says, and both of them together, the car, the purchase of the knife, Dickie's coverall. Yeah, and we don't know what else he bought on Amazon. We just, we know there was a Dickie's receipt, and we know Dickie's makes a coverall. So I think law enforcement's trying to link it all up. Brent says, I'm in Ada County in Idaho and hope to attend. Oh, that would be wonderful. Dave says, would not say I'm here to help you with several people present if one or two made an excuse to be there. Thank you for sharing that. Mike says, too many things actually don't know what he was thinking. like he didn't really care. Holly said, his attorneys claim there was no connection to the victims. Do they weren't, so they weren't dating? No, they weren't dating, but there are connections to the victims. And I just showed them to you. If you just are joining me, back up the live stream, you definitely will want to see it. 2 different gloves. Heather said that would be an experience when living so close by. Do you feel comfortable giving your opinion on the case? If not, I understand. Okay, and Texas Ranger said, I wouldn't want to be in BK's shoes at this point. I wouldn't either. And you know, guys, I'm just looking at the time. I do have a Sebastian Rogers live stream right now, so I'm going to head over there so I'm not late for that one. Please subscribe and give this a thumbs up on. Thank you for coming by and spending a little time with me. Follow me over to the Sebastian Rogers case next.